the soil's nutrients gradually unless other preventative measures are taken.
So do you
If
stop right here and make sure you understand that?
I think I stopped like after I read the second sentence, after the like, okay, let me like try to figure out what's going on. But
I would stop.
like,
I stop literally sentence by sentence.
okay, yeah, because this I couldn't, that's why I was considering like diagramming something because I felt like it was like too much for me to follow in my head.
So how would you diagram the first sentence?
Failure to rotate crops depletes the soil's nutrients gradually unless other preventive measures are taken. So,
What's our trigger word of conditional reasoning here?
unless,
Yep. And
and that's
what is that?
introducing the necessary.
Yep.
So,
And then what do we have to do to our sufficient?
negate it. So if you did see, even diagramming it is
Yeah.
weird.
Failure to rotate crops depletes the soil's nutrition gradually. So if you
So if
don't
you
ro-
do rotate crops,
rotate crops and you have nutritious soil, that must mean that you took preventative measures, right?
mhm,
Okay, keep going.
if the soil's nutrients are completely depleted, additional crops cannot be grown unless fertilizer is applied to the soil. It's almost feel like that's two conditionals in one sentence. So if the soil's nutrients are completely depleted, then no additional crops. See, I don't even know how to diagram that unless fertilizer.
That's why I wouldn't. I'm gonna diagram this just for visual learning. This one I would not be diagramming because I'm like, this is so intense. So if
Yeah,
soil nutrition is completely depleted, additional crops cannot be grown. So sufficient. So if soil, like if there's no, I'm gonna redo that. If there's no nutrients, that means that additional crops cannot be grown. But if there are no nutrients and crops are grown, what does that mean happened?
then they applied fertilizer.
Yes. Awesome. All right.
Okay, all other things being equal, if vegetables are grown in soil that has had fertilizer applied rather than being grown in non-fertilized soil, they are more vulnerable to pests and as a consequence must be treated with larger amounts of pesticides.
So if we have fertilizer rather than non-fertilizer, they are more vulnerable to pests, so vulnerable to pests,
Mhm.
and they must be treated with larger amounts of pesticides. Okay.
The more pesticides used on vegetables, the greater the health risks to humans from eating those vegetables.
So it is more pesticides equals more risk. All right. What kind of question is this?
Um, it's must be true.
Yep. So we're saying, suppose there were some vegetables that were grown in soil to which fertilizer had never been applied. So what happens if there's no fertilizer?
If there's no fertilizer, then there's no pesticides or
Well, not necessarily, because just if we put no pesticides here, that doesn't guarantee that there's no, if we say no fertilizer, that doesn't guarantee that these things are going to happen, right?
Okay.
So the only place that I really see pesticides or fertilizer is here. So if we don't have fertilizer, that means that we're not going to have crops if the soil is not nutrients,
Okay.
right? Do you see that? But let's go ahead and start with A and tell me what you think.
The soil in which the vegetables were grown may have been completely depleted of nutrients because of an earlier failure to rotate crops.
Do we know if the soil was the crops were rotated or not?
We don't know. All we know is suppose we know the fertilizer where they put the soil where they put these vegetables did not have fertilizer.
Let's skip this one for now and go on to the next one.
Okay. It is not possible that the vegetables were grown in soil in which crops had been rotated.
Can that be true, or must that be true?
So if there was never fertilizer,
So what would allow these vegetables to grow? What must have happened? Because we did not use fertilizer, which means that we did not have crops if the nutrients were depleted. So if we have nutrients for the crops to grow, what must have happened?
it must have rotated the crops.
So is it possible that the vegetables were grown in soil in which crops have been rotated? Is it not possible?
No, it's not
No.
not possible.
Right.
God,
Excellent.
this
Right.
question is so confusing to me.
Yes, let's go on to C.
C, the vegetables were grown in soil that had not been completely depleted of nutrients, but not necessarily soil in which crops had been rotated. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, does that have to be true?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, because we're saying either the crops had to be rotated or there were preventative measures taken, right?
Right.
Awesome. What did you say for this one?
Um, D.
Whatever the health risk humans face from eating their vegetables, these risks would not be. Do we know that they're not attributable to the pesticides on them?
No. When I read it, I guess I was thinking if they,
Maybe you missed the not.
I think so. I'm telling, this question is like super confusing to me. I don't know what it
So
is
if
about
you
it.
read through 2 sentences on the test and it's this confusing, I would just skip it since we're so close to your test date.
Okay.